Right, it's 4 o'clock, according to Apple, anyway, so we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Everybody received their board packet ahead of time. Hopefully you've had a chance to go over the agenda. Any changes to the agenda? All right, can I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? All right. Same with the minutes. The minutes were behind the agenda. For those, I did not have any comments or questions or changes. Anyone else? All right. With there being no comments or questions or changes to the minutes, we'll deem those approved. Brooke, we'll go right into the Library Foundation report, please.
Yeah, so tomorrow is Be Believed. It's the 38th annual Be, and this is the foundation's largest fundraiser of the year, and it is going to be a packed house. J.T. Ellison, a best-selling author, is coming, and she's the keynote speaker. All of the proceeds go directly back to the library. Money will go to digital services, like small branch program grants, lots of book support, resource support, and it's looking like it's going to be a successful event. So the foundation board has done a phenomenal job. That's everything.
Well,
thank you.
That's enough. Thank you. Brad, you want to give the Finance Committee report?
Yeah, if you look at some of those first pages for the financial analysis as of 8/31, you'll see that there is a bit of a overspend listed for early and for New Hope, but it's really covered later. It's just a timing thing, from what we're looking at. There is also a bit of an overpayment by City of Madison, but that's getting resolved as well, and that's more of a timing thing. So just looking at those pages for the financials, any questions on those? August 24. Okay. The budget is also there as well. If you look at that last page, it's in color, page 20 in the packet. There is a budget broken out by the totals and by each of the different locations. There's level funding from City of Huntsville. If you see that amount from City of Huntsville side, there's also going to be a change, although I think it's not decided what the final outcome will be on some of the hoopla budgeting in order to kind of bring that spending in line. And you'll notice as well there is a change in how hotspots are going to be, removal of the hotspots, since there have been some different issues with those, as well as the grants going away for that. And so look at the budget there, you can see the City of Huntsville section along with the other branches there broken out on the right side of that budget.
Anyone have questions for Brad on the budget? Connie, do you want to add anything?
We covered all of those.
Okay. All right, we do need to approve the budget for fiscal year 25. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the budget for fiscal year 25 is approved. Melissa?
Okay, governance. Several things kind of going on. We just talked about a couple of them, and then I'm going to do a presentation to get closer. So the first thing beginning on page 21 and really going for about 78 pages is our disaster plan. So every year our system has to review the disaster plan, revise it as needed. The changes are actually spelled out kind of year over year on page 98 in our board packet. Kind of here's what the updated changes are this year. It's updating the disaster team list, the insurance matters, business relationship list, the downtown first floor protected area image, and the list of virtual services. So relatively minor just updates for the disaster plan, but that is coming to you from governance for approval.
All right, we don't need a motion since it comes out of committee. All in favor of the fiscal year 25 disaster plan?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's approved.
Okay, next is the computer use policy. So relatively minor changes on this in your packets on page 99. It changes the name of the card from computer use only to guest patron card. It also updates certain technology protection mechanisms that are part of the rules. The rules delineated that certain things have to happen for those who are 18 and under, and so we updated the policy to reflect that age difference. And then finally, just some updated pricing for copies, for flash drives, etc. So that is coming from committee as well.
All right, all in favor of the revised computer use policy?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's adopted.
Okay, let me, I'm gonna kind of talk through kind of the more substantive changes that we're bringing to you from governance. And we've spent quite a bit of time kind of talking about policies, collection development policies, timeline. And so just to kind of walk through this, I will say it's an ever-evolving area. You know that we've tried to stay up to date with what's coming out of state APLS and trying to respond in a thoughtful but thorough way as we kind of walk through this. So, let me just see. Looks like it on here. Oh, it's thinking. Okay. I won't sit because I get too comfy. So in response kind of to the APLS rules, I'm just going to kind of, this is warming. We just kind of walk you through the timeline, and if you don't have the slides, it's okay. It'll come up. Okay, here it is. So if you recall back in May 17th, we presented a revised collection development policy that was in the board packet. We distributed that on May 17th. Really, same day, we got notice that APLS had issued new rules, new proposed rules at the time. We were continuing to study them, but we felt like we needed to continue the work that we were already doing to revise our policies. So we proceeded with the adoption of revision to collection development and statement of concern policies, and the board adopted them at our May 21st board meeting. Subsequently, the APLS rules were published and they were finalized in July. I spoke to you at the last meeting about kind of what the timeline looked like. Again, sort of an ever-evolving issue. What we were reading, based on some things that were coming to us from APLS, was that we would have a little more time to adopt the rules. But as we continued to get more information and continued to get up to speed, we realized that to maintain kind of our regular funding from the state, we would need to pass these and submit new policies that were in line with the APLS rules in October to avoid any sort of delay. So one of the things, just as we've continued to hear from patrons on this, candidly, some folks have said, well, what happens if we don't pass changes? What does that look like? And so we've taken a look at that. The bottom line is, you can see in the budget we just approved, our system was allocated over $500,000 in state aid. On average, it's about 6% of our overall system budget. However, all things are not equal. And so it represents a disproportionate amount of the budget for some of our smaller branches, such as New Hope is 26% of their budget. Monrovia is 22% of the budget. Gurley, 25% of the budget. So if we were to say, we're not making changes, we're going to continue to do just like we've done and continue to try to be responsive to the needs of our community, that would bear a pretty significant hit on those smaller branches who rely on library services and rely really on state aid to be able to stay open. So from governance's perspective, we just have to do this. We have to look at the changes that would be required. I will tell you, kind of at the outset, there will be enough in here to anger everybody. So in different things, there's different parts of this. So just know that that's kind of what we're looking at. So in addition to financial assistance, state aid also includes access to other services, such as interlibrary loan. If a patron comes in, they want a book that's not in our system, but it's in another system in the state, the interlibrary loan system allows us to get that for them. 738 items were checked out over the past 12-month time frame. In addition, APLS provides training for our library staff that's subsidized through APLS. So again, just another consideration on what comes with that state aid. So then what does that look like? It's going to hit 3 different places. One is material selection, one is material placement, and one is youth access. So what you're going to see next is kind of walking through the rules and kind of what exactly that looks like in terms of the policy changes that you have in your packet. First of all, collection development policy. So what are the selection criteria for young adults? That's one of the things that is in the rules. So it's kind of small, and sorry, it's like an eye test, I know. But basically, the top is the new rule that says, in order to receive state aid, the board must approve written selection criteria for minors that prevents the purchase or otherwise acquiring any material advertised for consumers under the age of 18, which contains obscenity, sexually explicit, or other material deemed inappropriate for youth or for children or youth. So we have pretty much mirrored this language. We've created a new policy, a new section, within the collection development policy that's entitled Selection Criteria for Young Adult and Juvenile Collection. And then we've mirrored the language from the rules. And then we have specifically defined those terms: sexually explicit, harmful to minors, obscene, and prurient interest from the Alabama Code. So we've really lifted those provisions from the code and put them into our policy. So it's not kind of our decision on what these are called. This is, kind of consistent with Alabama law. And then the call out from the rules is that age-appropriate materials regarding religion, history, biology, human anatomy are not considered to violate these rules. So again, lifted the language straight from the rules. So that has to do with the selection of materials that will go in those young adult and juvenile collections. Then the next thing, as I mentioned, was placement. So basically our placement provisions mirror the selection provisions. So the staff can't place materials in those categories in areas that are for youth and juvenile readers. And so it mirrors this, but it also talks about the HMCPL staff exercise as a discretion. They're on the front lines making these decisions, but the same process in the statement of concern will continue to apply if someone doesn't agree with how the decisions go. So that's placement. Then this is the other part of this, because if you remember my presentation last time, the rules are very explicit that children cannot have access to any adult materials without their parents' permission. And so we talked about the implications of that for those who are 18. These rules define a minor as 18 and under. Other parts of state law kind of talk about minors as 19 and under, but these rules talk about 18 and under. And so that parents will have to approve. Well, one of the things, and we'll see it in Connie's report later, is that one of the biggest parts of our collection is our digital content, whether it's Hoopla or Libby. And the nature of those services, for those who don't know, is those are online aggregators. Those are not something specific to HMCPL. Those are done nationally, but here's the thing, once you have access to anything that's in that digital collection. So we had to come up with a way to follow the rules while still recognizing the realities that that's a huge part of our circulation. So the way we've had to do this is we have a young reader section, young readers cards. The rule at the top says that our board must approve written guidelines that establish library cards for minors under the age of 18 that require parental approval before a minor's card is permitted to check out materials from the library's adult section, which, as I mentioned, includes Hoopla, Libby. And so how do we do this? We've had to create 3 levels of access in those young reader cards. Level 1 young reader basically gives you access to the physical juvenile collection, but no digital access. Level 2, the reader can get access to the physical juvenile and young adult collections, but no digital access. Level 3 is the individual can check out basically any book in the library, including digital access. This policy puts the burden on the parent to decide what level is appropriate for their children. The default is level 1, juvenile access, the easiest readers, unless a parent waives the right to have additional access for their children. And so that's kind of how we're working through the rules as it relates to young adult access or youth access to our collection. So, I know it's kind of like, okay, now what? What does this look like? So, let me just kind of tell you timeline-wise. First of all, our juvenile cards currently are assigned to patrons who are 16 and under, so it's a whole systems change that's going to make them now 18 and under. There are 23,000, almost 24,000 juvenile cards in our system right now, and so that's all going to have to be changed. In addition, there are 200,000 items that will need to be updated in the system to say it's a restricted access book now. That if you have a juvenile card, you can check out this set of books. If you have level 2 access, you can check out this set. If you have a level 3 access, it's kind of, you can check out any materials in the library. So that's gonna just take some time. In the 4th quarter, before year end, we believe that we'll be able to have waivers available for parents to begin selecting the level of access that their youth readers can have. By March 3rd, Connie's team has said they can update all of the materials in the system. Again, there's just some system constraints, 200,000 materials that can be updated 200 books at a time. That's it. And so it just takes time. March 3rd, the system updates will be complete. March 3rd of next year, the young reader cards will default to level 1 access, absent a signed waiver by a parent selecting another level. And so these 2 policies, we believe that if the board adopts these policies today, we will be able to sign certify that our policies are compliant with the new state rules and continue to receive state aid. So, board members, with that, what questions?
Do we know the cost of implementation of this? Are we gonna have to put date of birth on all these juvenile cards so that when they move from 16 to 17, that they don't have to get this?
Well, it's really going to be done when they move from 17 to 18.
Okay, right.
But Connie, do you want to speak to that? In terms of cost of implementation, I mean, I'll just be candid. This is an unfunded mandate from Montgomery that will be borne by our system without a way to pay for it. We're just going to absorb the cost.
So any changes to access will require parental waiver. So even with the birthday change, so with the birthday change, at 18, they can make that decision for themselves. But under that age, any other changes will require parent or guardian intervention to do that. And yeah, it's just gonna take time to kind of work through the process, I think. One of the things that we're changing and communicating to the public is that we will have 3-year expiration on cards. That'll give us a placeholder to check in with guardians when their child's card expired and say, are you interested in changing that access at this point? That way, if they haven't been thinking about it, we'll have somebody in the front line that speaks to them about it.
But a parent could change it at any time.
They can.
So if they decide they don't really want just level 1 access, they want level 2, they can change it any time, but it will require parental permission.
And what's the default when they get their card?
1.
And the expiration really is because we know people change cell phone numbers and move a lot in the community. That is the main point of the expiration, but it's also a chance for us to speak to the patron as well.
And do we know how much it's gonna cost to implement the changes with the computer system and the categorization of the books?
I think really that's gonna come down to, staff time, and it's a pretty big team of staff that will have to be implementing this. So we haven't calculated it yet, but it's gonna be staff from all levels of the library involved.
It'll just be during regular time. It's not gonna be double time.
But your point is a good one. It's gonna take time, and that's all staff time, in a sense. Other questions? Okay, with that, Kevin, it's coming as a recommendation from governance.
Okay, we'll, because these policies work hand in hand, we're just gonna vote on both of them together. I know Melissa and GW and Connie and Stephen and a bunch of folks put in a lot of work on this, so thank you for that, Melissa, and thank you for walking us through kind of the reason behind some of it and showing us how the sausage is made, for lack of a better analogy. All right, so it comes from governance. We don't need a motion. All in favor of adopting the revised election development policy and membership and circulation policy, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, no opposed. Those policies are adopted. So with the adoption of those policies, Connie, I know we had several votes up on statements of concern. We're just going to send everything back through staff to reevaluate all of the materials in light of the policy changes. Okay. Connie, Executive Director's report.
So I'm just gonna go through some statistics from the past couple of months for the system. Everything's been going very well. We just finished up summer reading and are entering into our fall programming. So just to talk about how circulation has gone this year, we, from the summer months from June to the end of August, we have had an increase of over 28,600 items circulating compared to last year in the same amount of time. In regards to downloadables, that is an area where we have increased circulation every month, and we're seeing a range of 15 to 18% increase every month on that statistic. And as you can see with the circulation by branch, the order has pretty much stayed the same. Our front runner is Madison, followed by Southfield. Just to highlight some of the books that we have that have been circulating well, just with the changes in the political environment, you see that we have the top circulating book, ebook is by J.D. Vance, so that has become a front runner in our Hoopla collection. And we have also Sarah Moss's book is a top audio book that's available for circulation. As far as library visitors, so we talked about June to August of last year being in comparison to what it's like this year. So we actually had 40,000 more people come through our doors compared to last year in the same amount of time. Our program attendance, it was a little low this past June compared to last year, but we caught up in July. We are 14% increase this past July, and in August we had a 34% increase compared to last year. And if you look at the visitors by branch, we have a little bit of shift in order. So South Huntsville leads the visitors. You see that North Huntsville is fourth, and Monrovia is fourth in circulation. And just to highlight some program and visitor things that happened. Our highest attendance program was Brick Galaxy. That's a partnership with the Tennessee Valley Lego Club. That was at South Huntsville, had 1,200 attendees. And then North Huntsville had an increase of 27% of visitors compared to last year in July and August.
It was 1,294, so we're gonna say 1,300 instead of 1,200, okay?
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions for Connie? Okay, thank you very much. All right, we'll go into the public comments phase. The timer is right here. You can see it from the podium, so please come up to the podium when I call your name. And watch the clock, because we do have a lot of folks who will try to manage that time as best. Well, we're going to manage that time. Tanya Stolting.
So some of this might not be relevant anymore. Thank you guys all for your hard work, but I went to the trouble of writing it, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. Do we use these?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Whatever your personal convictions are about homosexuality, I think everyone in this room agrees that gay people deserve love and kindness just like every other human being. But there's got to be a better way to get that lesson across to kids than graphic descriptions of how to make an anal penetration chain with 2 old men and a teenage boy, like one of the books under discussion here, Tricks by Ellen Hopkins, or detailed explanations on fisting and getting blowjobs, like another book under discussion, This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson. These books and others like them currently in the kids section of our libraries encourage kids to experiment with fetishes, sadomasochism, and hooking up with strangers, and then they teach them how to do it. And I have a hard time believing that someone looked at this and said, you know who would benefit from this information? Kids. Let's put it in the 13 and up section. I think, good Lord, I hope, that there are just too many books that need to be evaluated and too few of you. You probably read the publisher's recommendations and call it good. But here's the thing, publishers want to sell books. And if they can market those books to a wider audience, for example, by including kids, they make more money. Maybe instead of just griping at you, we, the people who love the library, can help you with this. Before you place a kid's book that contains adult themes like these, let us, people from both sides of this debate, read it and tell you honestly what's in it. And if it contains anything like the things I've been reading lately, put it in the adult section. Because surely to God, the people who want to keep these books in the kids section haven't read them all the way through. I think that if I was gay, I'd be pretty offended that this was my representation in literature, especially kids' literature. It seems to me that if we set out on purpose to raise a generation of homophobes, as well as completely dysfunctional adults, this is the kind of stuff we would give our kids to read. There's a character in one of these books who writes poems about suicide that make it sound like an attractive option. There are lots of descriptions of exactly how to score and get high on some very dangerous illegal drugs, as well as how wonderful those drugs make you feel. And for kids who are turning to the library as a means of escape from a painful living situation, you can imagine how harmful books like these can be. I have some experience here. Nothing nearly as horrific as the stuff I read in some of these kids' books, but when I was a kid, the library was my refuge, my safe space. Not to mention that addiction runs on both sides of my family. Kids are impressionable, and I wonder where I'd be now if I'd stumbled across some of these books back then, or if I'd even be here at all. Maybe you think it's solely the parents' responsibility to police what the kids are reading, but there are plenty of kids in our communities who don't have the luxury of that kind of supervision. And since those are the kids most often targeted by predators, sexualizing and desensitizing them seems like a pretty bad idea. Back when I was a single working mom, I used to drop my daughter off at the young adult section of the downtown library all the time. I would not do that now. I understand that yours is not an easy job and that you volunteered to do it, and I commend you for that. But we have got to be more careful. There's too much at stake. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hilton. Julia Harrison.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Julia. I come here not as a parent, but as someone who remembers all too well what it was like to be a child. I couldn't speak for myself then, but I can now, and I owe it to that little girl who grew up confused and afraid. I was a member of the Christian homeschool community here in Huntsville. Growing up, my exposure to media was rigorously policed by my parents and church. They believed they were protecting me, but now that I'm in my 30s, I can tell you they harmed me more than any book could ever have done. I was still curious, but I quickly realized my elders would make me feel bad for asking questions. So instead of going to them, I found other ways to indulge my curiosity. Their policing didn't stop me, it only made me better at lying and keeping secrets. It also left me ill-prepared for my future. I made it to my wedding day at age 22 with only a little sex ed, and thanks to my community's attitudes, this subconscious belief that sex is shameful. The results were embarrassing and painful. I swore I would never fail other children as thoroughly as my community had failed me. Even worse, it took me until age 30 to realize I'm not straight. I'm lucky my relationship survived that knowledge. It could have gone so differently. Perhaps worst of all, my community's obsessive control of my media intake created a visceral atmosphere of fear. They taught me to regard any outside source of information as tainted with Satan's influence. This belief cut me off from the rest of humanity by making me view the entire world as dark and full of terrors. The only safe place was my family, my church. Imagine my trauma when I learned that certain individuals in my community had been the truest, closest threat all along. I say all this to encourage the board not to let parents weaponize the library system against their children. Kids are people too, and by definition, they grow up. Many parents don't seem to realize how damaging it is to restrict children's ability to learn. Children have the right to ask questions and think for themselves. They also need access to trustworthy adults outside of family and church, even if that adult is just a voice in a book. Children with no access to the outside world are vulnerable children. Please remember that protecting children means something far different than just controlling what they read. Kids are resilient. I overcame the millstone my community hung around my neck, but they were the ones who did it to me, not a book in a library.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you.
Ms. Allen?
Good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it is. My name is Krista Callan. Thank you for making some policy changes, not just for the print books, but also for the digital. 1 year ago, I stood before you to thank you for proactively moving young adult books, primarily because I had just finished reading Tricks by Ellen Hopkins. And 12 months later, I'm still here, hoping for a decision tonight. Would it not be more timely and prudent to go ahead and vote on that book today? Anyway, all this talk about sex got me thinking, so the last time I went to the library, I thought, well, we keep talking about children's and young adult. What is in the adult section on sex? And I picked up this book, Sex for Dummies by Dr. Ruth. I think we all know who Dr. Ruth is. This is also copyright 2019, so that's pretty recent, pretty relevant. I know she's passed away since then. Does this book contain mature themes and content best consumed by adults? Yes. Is it less graphic and less vulgar than these young adult books? Yes, it actually is. Unlike in the book, it's perfectly normal. The illustration in here for how to put on a condom is a black and white drawing, clinical in nature, and therefore much less provocative than the full color illustration in the children's book. Other differences I saw. Chapter 8, which is entitled The Challenge of the Teen Years. So this is a great book to get and read with your teenagers. Dr. Ruth offers suggestions on how to develop relationships, not kinky sex parties that are illegal and harmful. Furthermore, she points out, quote, "You will never forget the first time you had sexual intercourse. So be as certain as you can that when you do it for the first time, the occasion is one that you'll treasure for the rest of your life, not one that you'll regret forevermore," end quote. What a difference from these books that target and groom our youth to be as sexually perverse and vulgar as can be. This book also addresses LGBTQ sexual orientations in chapter 18, but this comes with a warning about anal sex. While the young adult books like Naked and Sex Education: A Guide to Life portray anal sex as the new normal way to have intercourse, Dr. Ruth has this warning on page 272. She calls it the most risky form of gay male sex. Her reasons include the fact that the transmission of STDs is at the highest during anal sex due to greater likelihood that a condom will break, and rectal lining may also be torn and viruses gain easy access to the bloodstream. Is that information in this? No, it talks about STDs, but not the harms of anal sex, just the precaution to sanitize your dildos. So in closing, here is a warning from Dr. Ruth on page 387, quote, "By letting children see sexual material regularly, you also put them at the risk if they come in contact with someone who wants to take advantage of them. If some adult proposes that the child do something similar, I'll add to what's in here, he or she won't be frightened, but may accept this behavior as normal," end quote. And that right there is the agenda in these books. The agenda from publishers and authors is to sexualize and groom children, and until that is recognized, you're missing the big picture.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly.
Thank you.
Ms. Homework?
So yeah, I'm here today to thank you for the policies. I guess my worry, my concern is, are these policies, are we going to interpret them through a Nancy Pack lens, or are we going to interpret them through a John Wall lens? We know that John Wall was just elected as chairman, and so this, I understand, I see what's up on the screen, I read everything that Melissa was speaking about, but how much room for interpretation are we going to allow when it comes to this? Is this just to shut parents up like myself, or are we actually going to go through with everything the way that it is laid out through the APLS policy and also through what Governor Ivey established? So that's my first thing I wanted to talk about. And also to kind of just talk about Julia, who spoke. If you think that us keeping books and materials, the intellectual freedom of children away from these perverse sexual ideologies, ideas, whatever, you say it like it's a bad thing.
Ms. Homework, address the board.
So,
Address the board, not an individual in the audience.
so, but that is the common kind of denominator with how they approach things. And yes, the point is we want to protect our children from these materials. We don't want them in their hands, okay? We're not shy about it. This is exactly what we're talking about. I just want to make sure I made that very clear. The other thing also is we know that there's a budget set aside for materials that are going to be purchased, also materials that are gifted and whatnot. How are we going to handle that going in the future? Can we have a list of everything that's bought in the inventory, or everything that's gifted and whatnot, so that parents like myself don't have to go through and play the game of going through the library and trying to find all these books to then do a reconsideration form, which I only get 3 per year, which that needs to be changed as well. So can we get something going on along those lines as well, so we can all just have full transparency, so we can all move forward and we can approach all of these issues and deal with it the way that our community, and it represents our community. Remember, we are in a red state. We are in a red area. North Huntsville is red. Our school system, everything here is very conservative. And so if it's going to reflect the community, then it should reflect the community, and the community deserves to know what's being purchased and what's being gifted and put into circulation. So can we please get some sort of a list of some sorts that moms like myself can access? Thank you.
And I apologize if I missed this last name, Kimberly Munchausen?
Yes.
I'm not a sleeper, but I'm coming here for children because even bars have age requirements and alcohol requirements. There are movie theaters that have requirements and boundaries. My son just turned 19 and he could not take his younger 3 teenage brothers to see a movie because it was past the curfew at the mall for minors. And I feel like the library has a responsibility as well to set boundaries for protection. And I would even go as far as to volunteer myself if you guys need help to do that, because I care about children. And it's heartbreaking to me. I'm adopted, and there are other ways that you could teach kids about sex and having babies and all that. I had a child at home, and some of my children witnessed it. They witnessed me giving birth, which is a beautiful, God-created thing. That's a miracle. And I've also been sexually abused in foster care. And I know the dangers
firsthand. And I'm ashamed of the lack of protection that adults are not giving children anymore because people want to prove and force their ideology on others. And children are not the ones to receive that. My husband was in the military and served over 20 years protecting my country. And he did not bring children to the battlefield. He protected them. And that's all I have to say. Because other people have said other things that I've heard as well. And I thank you for your time, and I thank you for what it has nothing to do with money. This has nothing to do with hard work. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with protecting our children, because they are the next generation. They are the biggest investment. If we really think about it, they are the biggest investment that we will ever have. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you for your time.
Susan Stewart.
Hi, I'm Susan Stewart from Huntsville. I wanted to begin by following up on a request that was made to the board to include the statement of concern filings in the board packet, but I guess that will be put off until when you're actually receiving statements of concern again after the whole collection's been gone through, because I and others had hoped that we thought would promote transparency and probably be less work for the staff than having to respond to current records requests. Thank you for the presentation by the Governance Committee last time, and also this time regarding the new HPLS Library Code amendments. It's informative and infuriating. I'd like to think that the logistical and financial burdens imposed by the amendments are unintended consequences. But when I look at the attacks on librarians, libraries, and other institutions at the state and local level, I find that these consequences are the result of indifference and arrogance. Indifference to the harm caused to library patrons, especially children and people with few resources, and the arrogance to believe that the operations of complex institutions can be micromanaged by legislation and rules written by people with no expertise. We see this with the IVF debacle that has kept Alabama in the news because legislators with no medical training thought they could write a law that would replace the judgment of actual doctors. And we see this with the actions of the APLS board's code changes. The new chair of the board, John Wall, had to have Wi-Fi hotspots explained to him as he voted to cut funding for them last week. The same John Wall who proposed and pushed through the additional code amendments that went much further than what Governor Ivey had proposed. During the committee meeting where these amendments were endorsed before being presented to the full board, I personally heard a committee member say, "It's not censorship. Parents can always buy books from a bookstore." Indifference, arrogance. Legislation and lawsuits have been filed against bookstores and publishers. A local bookstore right now is being targeted on social media. And notably, that comment reveals that the intent is to remove and not just move books in the libraries. I'm taking this opportunity to continue to raise awareness of bills that have been pre-filed for next session. It is not too early to start talking to your legislators. HB 4 threatens librarians with jail. It applies criminal obscenity laws to public and K-12 school libraries and librarians, and expands the definition of sexual conduct, adding vague phrases such as exaggerated clothing and gender-oriented conduct. SB 6 will allow local library boards to be removed at will, and with a 2/3 vote of the appointing body. This bill is intended to punish and control library boards, such as the one in Ozark, Alabama, that refused to remove all LGBTQ content when the mayor demanded it. Please keep these bills on your radar. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Andrea Simmons.
She had something come up, so she and her husband are not able to be here.
Okay. Nancy Robertson.
First, I'd like to say a big congratulations over those numbers that you shared with us today. That is so impressive to think that through all the 10 branches, you're having such an increase in the volume of patrons and the services that occupies. You know, I appreciate the creativity and effort that goes into that. In my many years of work with senior adults through the Area Agency on Aging, I always felt grateful that the library took bookmobiles to senior living complexes so that even if they couldn't travel like they used to, they could travel for books, even if they couldn't travel across town sometimes. Now I've learned about a brand new service that the library is starting, providing bags that you can check out, that you can take to loved ones that are seniors, bags that have books or games or movies even, that, you know, could spark conversation and engagement and really get people involved in it. I think my mother would have loved something like that, you know, when it got harder to communicate with her. At the other end of the age range, I was delighted to learn about the upcoming Teen Refashion Show, where teens take existing garments and transform or upcycle them before a panel of judges. They can model their transformed outfit or get somebody else to do it, to be the model, which is all happening in a couple of weeks on October 3rd. And the best part, the winning prize is a brand new sewing machine. I just thought that was so cool. I would love to have that. So a big thank you to the board for your leadership and for the senior staff for all the creativity and efforts that you put into the library services.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Okay, that concludes public comments. Anybody have any other business we need to take up? Okay, our next meeting will be November 19th at 4 p.m. here at North Hunt School. And with that, we are adjourned.
All right, good.
Thanks for sending me that Thank you. Yeah. Okay, good. And I got Christine. That's how we all start. Then maybe if we go for it,